The Dice Tower is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. And by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff, in stock at coolstuffinc.com. The Dice Tower, episode 542.
Monster Games.
Roar. Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Geoff addresses the issue of counterfeit games. Tom and I chat with Jeff Tidball about the state of the hobby, and I check our voicemail. Finally, we smash, hunt, devour, and roar through our top 10 monster games. I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the button to my corner guard, Tom Vassell.
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's another curling reference. See, curling's on TV.
Go? We get it. The Olympics started. Yay!
Yeah, but this is the only time I get to see curling. The Canadians are spoiled. They get to see it all the time. This is the only time I get to see it, so yay.
No, I give you that. I'm not going to make fun of curling for at least 10 minutes. Okay, well, so this has been an interesting show, right? Because monster games, I thought, that'd be an interesting topic. Let's talk about games with monsters and people like monsters. And I forgot that monster game is what people often refer to giant war games.
Yes. Yeah, researching monster games was a little tricky because I was looking at geek lists and stuff. But yeah, these 1842, battle games. No, that's not what I want.
I almost always, folks, I hate to give out these secrets, right? I do a lot of things to find top 10 lists. I'll go through my collections. I'll look at things. I use my knowledge. But one of the things is I look at geek lists because I was like, someone's probably made a list of that. And usually that's the case. But you'd be surprised how few of the top 10s Eric and I do that people have not made a geek list. And if you're not sure what a geek list is, Board Game Geek is a website and people make lists of games there. And they make thousands of these lists, but they're very often just like, these are games I like. These are games that are fun. I think it'd be more interesting if we saw things like what we're talking about today. But we'll get to that later on.
Yeah. It's also very difficult to search for geek lists. When you search for something on Board Game Geek as a geek list, you end up with a ton of results that are often nothing like what you're actually looking for. It's hard to find the right
Google
terms.
Comes in handy.
Yeah.
You need to click on title. The word has to be in the title. So if you click on that will narrow it down considerably.
That might have helped.
Yeah, I do that all the time. So if you do it to the title, and then you start thinking of words that are synonym to what you're looking for. So if I'm looking for auction games, I might think, okay, bidding. I might look for a geek list with bidding in or something like that. Or going, gone. Or I'll just think of different things. You'd be surprised when you find things. But always look for it in the title, because otherwise you just run into a big mess. Well, folks, I just really want to encourage all of you to come and join us on every other week. Eric and I do Dice Tower tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, and it is a bushel load of fun. It is a bushel load of fun. It is. We do little game show things. We let you pick the next game that we're going to review, and you get to see me throw boxes around, and we answer questions, and I have a really good time doing it. You get to see Tom torture me with random trivia questions and party games. It's great. You know what? I thought you would do better at those party games in the last one. So I don't know what to tell you. Thanks. Really. Well, appreciate that. No, I thought you were like an expert at Linky. Not really. The only time I've played it is with you. So, you throw me into the deep end and, have me compete against the online audience. And, I got 1 out of the 3. You did. So You're doing well here. Yes. I will have a new and improved game next time. Okay, also, folks, we started Dice Tower Facebook group. Now, this seems like, didn't you guys do that 5 years ago type thing? Yeah. And the answer is no. We had a Dice Tower Facebook page. And I kept looking at it, and we've been posting our news and stuff there. And I'm like, man, this page is kind of boring. How comes no one ever says anything? I'm like, oh, they can't. Well, like, how do you do that? That's a group. I'm like, oh, well, maybe we should start our own group. We did, and there's over 2,000 people joined it like in a day.
Yeah, it's very active. A lot of people.
I'm so happy with it.
Everywhere. Yeah, it's really cool.
Some of the good things about it being active are it is cluttering my feed, and I love it because I'm not seeing all the nonsense that I normally see about whatever politic thing happened that day, cluttering my feed, or who won the football game. I'm seeing lots of cool threads from that. And we're not going to always be able to answer all these. There are literally hundreds of threads, but I have a lot of good moderators in there, and I'm going to hold strongly on the moderation here. I want it family-friendly, no trolls, no, yelling at each other over really dumb things. But you can argue about games all you want. That's fine. But come and join that. So that's exciting. If you backed our Kickstarter, you should be getting soon, either this week or next week, we'll be sending out a survey to that. So if you missed it, the Kickstarter, you need to email immediately, and I'll get you in on that if you still want to do that. But otherwise, we're going to send those out, so keep an eye out for that. That's all our bookkeeping stuff. Let's talk about some games. I'll let Eric go first with a game that, are you kidding? This is the first time you played it?
Actually, I played this a while ago at Gen Con, actually, when it was first released, I believe. But the reason I'm talking...
Origins, when we had a secret sneak peek of it?
No. So what happened, the game is Clank in Space. At Origins, no, this is when you guys were having a secret meeting, playing an early version of this with the folks from Renegade Games. And then someone walked by the booth. I happened to be in the booth at the time, not playing the game. And someone's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, they're playing a Clank map. And the reps from Renegade are like, yeah, a very secret thing that no one's supposed to talk about. And I'm like, oh, I mean, nothing. They're doing nothing. Move on. No one's here playing anything. But anyway, Clank in Space is the space version of Clank, where it's a deck-building game. It's, I guess, a spaceship crawl, not a dungeon crawl, where the object is to get past or get 2 secret keys, access keys, that allow you into the treasure section of a ship and then grab the best treasure you can and get out before you die. But every time you purchase a card, because you have this currency that you can buy cool cards for your deck, every time you buy one of these cards, you have the chance of triggering the bad guy. And whenever the bad guy triggers, all of the noise that you have made, because some of your cards make noise and produce cubes, Clank cubes, that go into a general pool, but every time the bad guy activates, all those cubes go in a bag, and then you draw cubes out, and if your cube comes out, you're going to take damage. You also have icons for movement and attack to get through obstacles, but you have to move around to different rooms and get access keys that let you into this aft section of the ship where all the cool stuff is. And the farther you go, the more lucrative the stuff is. But of course, the farther you go, the harder it's going to be to come out. And as soon as somebody comes out, then things start to accelerate, and the bad guy's going to activate more often and pull more cubes and get more and more upset. And if you don't make it out of the ship before the bad guy kills you, well, you're not going to get any points. And maybe you can get close to the end of the ship and get out or die. So if you get close to the end and die, your friends can save you, and you can still earn points. But if you manage to get all the way off the ship, you get a big bonus. And then most points wins. So you can go quick.
I wonder what that's like to get all the way off the ship.
I think I've been able to do that. But anyway, I like this system better than the original Clank. I like having to hit the 2 points and sort of slowly work your way into the section of the ship. I like the theme. I like the art design. There's some nice little subtle jokes, sci-fi tropes that they make fun of. The cards are fun as they come up. The reason I'm talking about it is that my son, my youngest, this is the 6-year-old, happened to spot the original Clank on my brother's shelf and wanted to play it at like a family game day. And I don't know, maybe we may get to it. Well, we'll see. And we never got to it. And he was upset that he didn't get to play Clank, And so for Christmas, we got Clank in Space. And he was super excited to play it, and he wanted to unwrap it and go through the rules, and I did a tutorial with him. And then one night, I rushed through dinner so we'd have enough time to play the game before we had to go to bed. And then as soon as I got it set up, he decided he wanted to go play video games with his brother and left me sitting there with a fully set up Clank in Space.
I knew this was going to happen as soon as you were building up to too high of a point there.
Yeah. So for the 6-year-old audience isn't quite there yet. I think he liked the system. When I did a tutorial and did a couple sample turns, he understood what he was doing. But it hasn't been a complete hit with him. But for me, I really enjoyed Clank in Space. This was the reason I bought it. Is because this was my opportunity to buy the Clank system. I did not have the original, and so I was delighted that my son was interested in it so I could go buy Clank in Space. And it's going to stay in the collection for a while, and someday I will play it. Clank in Space. I like it.
I think my next game Eric might like, and that is Zombie Tower 3D.
Really?
Even though it doesn't have a great name. First, it starts with zombie and ends in 3D, which just sounds bad. But this game is a game in which you build a 3-dimensional tower.
Okay.
On the board, and so it's for 3 or 4 players, and you can see your slice of the tower. So there's 3 floors and different rooms in each floor, and you have your character moving around on your floor. And there's going to be zombies showing up, and there's going to be survivors showing up. And on your turn, you got to go move. You're going to use different actions, go around, pick up pick up the survivors and rescue them, and also run away from zombies. Every once in a while you might fight zombies, you might find a few weapons and such, but it's mostly about running and picking up survivors. You're frantically looking for vaccines and either a way to signal the helicopter, in which case you all need to get to the roof in one room and signal the helicopters, or find a secret tunnel in the basement. The thing is, you can talk to each other about what you're doing, but you can't see what the other people are doing. It's a co-op game.
Ah.
And there are these little holes in the walls where you can even slide a card through, and then they have to run to that room and they can get it. Which I thought was a pretty neat little concept, right? I don't know what it... am I pulling a brick out of the wall and throwing a gun through? Get it, Eric! You think I would eventually just break the wall there or whatever and meet Eric and just work together. But it makes for a fun little game. It's not a heavy game. It's light. You could even... It's technically semi-co-op because when you get to the end and you're all escape or whatever, you're like, who freed the most people? That's the person who's the real winner. Marvel Legendary does the same thing. And just like Marvel Legendary, you can totally ignore that and just play straight co-op.
Mm-hmm.
So I like it. It's pretty fun. I mean, it's not a lot of depth to the game, but it feels interesting because you're working together and you have to talk to each other. You can't see each other. If you're playing with a 4-player game, it's even more difficult. Well, in one thing, everyone has to have a vaccine. So there's only so many vaccines in a deck of cards. If I find 2 of them, I have to give one to you.
Right.
Except the slot that I was going to give it to you is a room full of zombies. So maybe we need to go downstairs. But I don't really want to go downstairs because then I have to come back up to find a helicopter.
Right.
Things like that are in this game. It's a lot of fun. I recommend it. Zombie Tower 3D.
Huh. So can you describe this tower? How is this thing built?
It's a cardboard tower. So it's made of some stand-up pieces, cardboard pieces that stand up to show the walls, and then you slide the floors in. And then on the floors, just different tokens are going to be sitting there.
Okay. I'm just having trouble visualizing it.
It's kind of like any other 3D cardboard tower type thing. But it's tall enough, I would say it's at least, a foot tall or so that you, and the way it's curved, you really can't see what the other people are doing.
Okay. Next for me is a small box game from Smirk and Dagger Games. It's called Biotics, and that's spelled Biotix.
Ooh, I like this game.
This has virus meeples, which are adorable. They're these adorable little things in various colors, and every player has a petri dish with sort of sections for each color of virus. And on your turn, you're going to draw from a bag 2 of these little virus meeples, and then you decide to put them either in your petri dish or in somebody else's petri dish. Why would you give them to somebody else? Well, because if you have too many of a particular type, they explode. And when they explode, each color does different things. Sometimes they spread out to the other players. Sometimes they just disappear. Sometimes they make all of the viruses of that color disappear. And so you're looking around, do I want to earn, because you're going to earn points at the end of a round. if you have these different colors, and some of them are worth more than others, but the ones that are worth more points are harder to keep because they're more volatile. They're quicker to disappear, or they're quicker to cause bad things to happen, or they're sort of a draw for other people to cause you to explode. So it's definitely a very mean game, because you are constantly triggering these viruses in other people, trying to scramble for whatever points you have, and then setting up a couple points and going, don't look at me, please don't look at my Petri dish, as someone draws various colors. And there's a variable end game for each round. Once you go around a certain number of times, a token goes in the bag, and when that gets drawn, then that ends the round. You don't know when that's coming up. I enjoyed this. It's chaotic for sure. And it's
I think though the shortness of it makes the chaoticness not so bad.
The weight is certainly, I think it goes for 3 rounds. That sounds right. Something like that. There's a tremendous catch-up mechanism. I played this at a convention, and it was one of the play-to-win games. So you can play the game, and then you sign up on a little slip of paper and put your name in a hat to win it at the end of the day. And there is a catch-up mechanism that if somebody is way behind, I think more than 20 points behind, they can simply write down one of the colors of viruses and an exact number. And if at the end of the round they have that virus at that exact level, they get a huge bonus of points. Like 30 points.
Have you ever seen that work? I never have.
I did it. I was behind by 20 points, and I wrote down on my slip of paper what I wanted, and I managed to get it, which was enough to give me the win in the last round. Problem is, it was my play-to-win entry slip. And when we were in the middle of the game, the guy came around and said, I'm collecting all the play-to-win entry slips, and I handed it in without thinking. And then when I won, no one believed me that I won, because I no longer had the slip of paper that I had written it down, that I had gotten the correct prediction. And I mean, I swear, it was exactly it.
No one believes you here either, Eric.
I won Biotics.
Pixar didn't happen.
Anyway, that's Biotics. I enjoyed it. It's cute. It's quick. It's fun. It's nasty, but I had a good time.
All right. Well, I'm just going to briefly mention Rising Sun and say it is sheer awesomeness.
Ooh.
All right. The Kickstarter stuff has been delivered. I got the Kickstarter. I backed it on Kickstarter. I don't normally back games, but this one had a lot of cool extra stuff. And honestly, I think the base set's great, and you will not be upset about it. Just don't look and see what the Kickstarter people got. But this game is so good. It's easily one of my favorite games ever. It mixes negotiation with trying to outguess the people in the combat system with just amazing miniatures and a ton of miniatures. It plays in a good amount of time, 90 to 2 hours. I love it. This is probably getting talked up to death online. Is this better than Blood Rage? A lot of people are going to ask, and the answer to that is yes. But they're so different that it's, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I like Rising Sun better,
okay.
But on any given day, I'll play Blood Rage. I don't think they're the same. I think if you like one, you'll probably like the other. Hey, Eric, you like Blood Rage, right?
I do. I enjoy that. I don't own it, but I do enjoy it.
I think you would like Rising Sun.
Okay.
I really do. I think that some people might come in and be like, oh, it's a big miniature fighting game. Yeah, a little. Maybe there's some fighting in it, but I think Eurogamers would like it also. You just got to ignore that there's big, ugly miniatures. I say that half in jest, but I saw some thread where some guy was writing this long thing about, I can't understand how people like big, ugly hunks of plastic. And I was thinking, what? That's amazing. They look wonderful. But some people just don't like it.
Okay.
Look past that. You'll still like Rising Sun. It's terrific.
What's the primary mechanism? Does it have the card drafting of Blood Rage?
No, not really. What the mechanism is that you take an action and everyone gets the action. It's kind of like Puerto Rico, but the person who takes the action gets a benefit.
Right.
Except that at the beginning of each round, you can make an alliance, and if you make an alliance with someone, they will also get the benefit when you do the action.
Oh.
So that adds a little bit in that. And then you do this for several rounds, and then there's some of the provinces that you've been guys into, there will be a fight. And so the other major thing is there's like an auction fight. Like it's very similar to that in Cry Havoc. You hide your things behind a screen, and you can bid on adding mercenaries to your crew, or capturing someone from the enemy, or just committing suicide your whole army. But you'll get some points that way. But you're going to lose the battle overall. So there's a lot of interesting things going on in this game.
All right, last thing I want to talk about is that my church this coming weekend is doing something called the Day of Fun. And I just sort of heard about this when they announced it, and the pastor came up and said, "Will you teach games?" And so they're running
Eric's like, "Not for fun."
They're running, the session is actually called Your New Favorite Board Game with Eric Summerer. So the pressure is high. So far I know I'm expecting about 16 people. And I know I'm going to bring Splendor. I'm going to bring Transamerica because it plays 6. It can be explained super fast. Can't Stop because it's classic push your luck and can also be explained super fast. And I want some sort of card game. I'm thinking No Thanks, but maybe there's another more modern one that I should go with. And I really need to bring a kids game as well. And I know we always hate this when people ask this on the forums, but I was still looking for Tom's advice on this one. Is there another No Thanks level of complexity card game that would play in like 20 minutes or so?
Well, 6 Nimmt.
6 Nimmt for sure. That's easy to throw. I could throw a lot of these in the bag, and you could always set up another table with one of these card games. That's sort of my overflow plan. And then as far as kids games go, I'm thinking maybe Dragon Tower would be a good table presence one. That's the one with the little plastic dragon that pulls the rock out and collapses everything. Maybe Dancing Eggs, but I don't want people to fall over each other. But anyway, that's my plan. I'm not sure.
I'm trying to think here. I found that the hottest gateway style game I have these days over anything else is Century. Spice Road or Go Home Edition, whatever. That game is doing so well.
Yeah, I mean, I was considering throwing that in the bag as well.
I've had I've had so many people just fall in love with this game who you would not consider to be gamers, right?
Okay.
And it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, the simplicity is certainly there. I think I'll throw that one in there as well. And that should be plenty, I think. I could throw in like Lupin Louie or something. I don't know. And you know what? This is going to happen between now when we're recording this, and we'll be, by the time I edit this, it will have happened. So future Eric can let us know how things went. Oh, hey, future Eric here. It went pretty much the way I just described it. We had Transamerica out, we had Splendor out, which took a full 90 minutes. That we only had 90 minutes, and it took almost the full time for that group to get through that game. Can't Stop was played like 2 times in a row because they liked it so much they just wanted to start up again. We also had Lupin Louie on a side table to keep there were only my kids and a couple of teenagers, so it kept some of them involved in between games. My son tried to get the party game Crosstalk running, but couldn't quite get the critical mass to make that happen. And Codenames Disney hit for a little bit. It wasn't a giant success. We, again, didn't have too many people playing it at once. But it went relatively well. But Splendor, Transamerica, Can't Stop, all were very big hits. Thanks, future Eric.
I hate that guy.
That guy's awesome.
Anyhow. Okay, let's bring down the mood. Vampires and unicorns.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, the unicorns look like they escaped from a nightmare in Futurama.
Oh, these are like battle unicorns?
The vampires look like they were drawn in 18th century spooky style goth way. It's 2 very distinct different types of artwork.
Oh.
And it was interesting. I looked at it as like, oh, that looks interesting. That looks weird. And so I pulled out, and the game is essentially 2 decks of cards, one for the vampires and one for the unicorns, and a bunch of tiles. You place these tiles on the floor, not on the table, on the floor, and then you stand on opposite sides and you throw cards and try to hit the other tiles and destroy them.
Okay.
You draw a card from your deck, and half your deck is just a normal card. It means throw that card. It will say vampire attack or unicorn attack. But the unicorns can also, sometimes it will say duocorn attack, which means you throw 2 cards. Or the vampire one might say throw a card, and if you hit a tile, you can go again. That's the entire game. Now, being someone who's 6'4", I'd like to talk to you about how much fun it is to throw a card and then lean over and pick it up. It is amazing for your back. And you can't, I mean, if you throw a card, it's not going to go anywhere. So the game's like, crouch down and throw them. Again. It's one thing to throw discs. It's one thing to throw round cards, maybe, or tiles. Throwing cards is an acquired feat. When you see that guy who throws the card into a hat, that takes a lot of practice.
Mm-hmm.
Or the people who throw cards, I guess they can make them stick in wood and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For a normal person, throwing a card is just not a fun thing. This is not a good game. I played it with kids, too, and they were like, what else you got?
Huh.
So you're going to be attracted by the funky artwork on it, but let me tell you, it is just throwing cards. That is literally the whole game.
How would
Vampires and Unicorns. Pass.
How would you compare this to Flowerfall or Maximum Throwdown from AEG?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I talked to Z about this, and I said, Maximum Throwdown, that's fading for me over time. But Flowerfall stays pretty strong because Flowerfall, you are literally dropping cards. And that's kind of intriguing because, first of all, they're two-sided, and it's like an area control game. And while it's not perfect because the cards will move as you drop them, you have a whole lot more control when you drop a card than when you throw a card.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I did that ridiculous Flowerfall where we dropped them from a story up.
Yes, that went well.
Yeah, if you notice how many times we repeated it. But it's... it just felt like there was some control. Throwing cards, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. So Vampires Unicorns was a pass.
Okay. Well, but you did remind me, though, I should probably throw Flowerfall in my bag for the church thing.
Yeah, that one might work. The only problem with Flowerfall is explaining area control does not compute as much as you might think it does.
That's true. I'll think about it.
But when you take Flowerfall, Eric, make sure you take the copy that was actually printed by that publisher. No fakes.
Well, I mean, is that big a deal?
3, 2, 1, go.
It's time for GameTek with Jeff Engelstein, where we find out how games really work.
In January, ICV2 interviewed Christian Peterson and Steve Horvath from Asmodee North America. One of the topics they discussed was the increasing problem of counterfeiting of popular game titles. They threw out some speculative but eye-opening statistics. Peterson said, quote, "We feel, and this number is speculative, but it's going to be somewhere on that range, that Asmodee North America's sales are going to be affected somewhere between $5 and $10 million this year alone. We believe for some games that more than 70% of all sales in the U.S. market have been counterfeit." Unquote. Now, the biggest titles that are counterfeited are, not surprisingly, the most popular ones, Ticket to Ride, Catan, and Seven Wonders. I've even seen pictures of counterfeit copies of Pandemic Legacy, which seems like a tremendous amount of effort to duplicate with all the boxes and envelopes and stickers and everything. Now, the rise of counterfeiting is the result of a few factors. The biggest is the growth of the board game market. As games become more popular, there's more to be gained by counterfeiting them. When we were a small hobby, there was very little to gain by investing in making a counterfeit. The other facet is the advancement of scanning technology. It is much simpler and cost-efficient to scan boxes, boards, and tokens than it used to be. And 3D scanners are also better, allowing for duplication of plastic components like the trains in Ticket to Ride. When this interview was released, I saw a lot of comments from people saying basically, it serves Asmodee right for manufacturing products in China. But ignoring the fact that there's many products that are counterfeit that are not made in China, the fact that they're manufacturing offshore has no bearing here. The counterfeits are being done at other factories through scans. Now, I've personally, in my regular business, been doing manufacturing in China and other Asian countries for 30 years on a wide variety of products, and had just one instance of a factory pulling something like this, and we yanked the business out of there very quickly and told others in the industry about the problem factory. There are lists. They weren't lists back in the day when we had this issue, but even now it's easier for people to share stories about factories. and that particular one, I happen to know, went out of business. Now, I guess it's possible that a game manufacturer is printing extra copies and then selling them on the black market, but honestly, I find it really hard to believe. The potential reward for that factory pales in comparison to the risk of Asmodee pulling all of their business. Now, we also do a lot of work in fashion, mainly handbags, supplying stuff to Coach and Michael Kors and Calvin Klein and so on, and frequently visit the factories that assemble their bags. The big fashion places have very strict inventory control systems at these factories. They know exactly how much product, leather and buckles, goes in and how much comes out. And anything that's listed as scrap needs to be accounted for. I personally know at least one factory that tried to do something to Coach, and they lost all the business and are also now out of business. Now, almost all counterfeits, as I said, are done by other factories, not the ones making the products. I will admit that if you find a printer that is making counterfeits in China, it's going to be much harder to pursue legal remedies than in the United States or Europe. But whether you print your real games in China or Germany, a counterfeiter can set up anywhere. Of bigger concern here is the way Amazon does fulfilled by Amazon products. Now, Amazon offers a program called commingled inventory, which puts all of the same product into a big pile, even if it comes from different sellers. So if I ship in 100 games and Bob sends in 100 of the same game and I sell one, it may come from my games or maybe from Bob's games. And it's easier for sellers to use commingled inventory since it doesn't require special labeling. You can just use the standard barcode on the box. So when people add counterfeits to the big pile, it makes things go off the rails. As a counterfeiter, I can ship in garbage, charge very little, and there's a good chance that when someone orders a game from me, they actually get a real copy, not a counterfeit that was shipped in by somebody else. Then I get a good rating, and people will buy from me in the future because they see my price is good and my ratings are good. So it's tough to track down who's doing what. Now, Amazon may have some way of tracing who shipped in the original goods, but I'm not sure. Christian Peterson says in the interview that Asmodee is working with Amazon to try to resolve the problem, but I'm not sure what that means. So, look, if I'm buying a fake Coach bag or a fake Rolex from some guy on the corner, I know it's fake. And that's not the case here. You can buy something from a legitimate seller on Amazon and get a counterfeit through no fault of their own. That's the bigger problem, I think. If it's a known source that's selling all the counterfeits, you can shut that down or at least alert people to the bad actors. If the industry continues to grow as projected, attempts to sell counterfeits will only increase as well. It's going to be interesting to see how the industry, distribution channels, U.S. customs, and consumers all react to this. This is Jeff Engelstein with GameTek.
Now, this is interesting because Jeff brings into this background from outside of board games, right? He actually knows about this information. Every time I tell someone about this, they're like, this isn't that big of a deal.
Everybody that I've talked to, everything I've read is confirming basically that this is happening. I saw a thread today of somebody with a Pandemic Legacy copy that he bought from a friendly local game store and thought, well, yeah, this is going from the legitimate channels and this is the real thing. And he found out it really wasn't. And he's put up a video, how to tell if your copy is fraudulent. And
I got to say, though, if he bought it from a local game store, then there's a problem there. Because if that's happened, then that store is probably not doing something correct. Or some fraud is happening somewhere.
Yeah. But the Amazon thing is really sort of troubling that the same product from all these different sources is being melded in the same bin. And so you don't know who actually contributed to that bin when you buy something. And how are you supposed to track down and know that if you want to do the right thing and you want to pay the fair price to get the real deal, how do you guarantee that that's what's happening if these counterfeits are getting mixed in? It's not like you're going on the street and buying a copy of Pandemic from a guy that's kneeling down in front of a blanket. I mean, I've done that with a couple of CDs in New York, but I'm not doing that with board games because I want to buy the real thing. I want the money to go to the publisher. How do you prevent buying counterfeits by, if you can't trust who you're buying it from? It's really sort of troubling.
I don't even know what to tell you in this situation. But I think being informed is step one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess knowing how to spot the real thing if you're holding it in your hands. If you're buying online, you don't necessarily know that. But maybe when you get it, you can immediately say, yeah, this is not the real thing.
This sounds like a good thing for a future interview. We'll talk about counterfeiting on the show. I think that'd be a good a good idea.
That
there.
would be good. But speaking of which, we have some answers to be gotten from another source. And now it's time to chat with a gaming luminary to get a new perspective on the state of the hobby.
All right, folks, we're going to do something different this time. Instead of doing questions and answers, we are going to do questions and answers, but we're going to be maybe asking some questions. And we brought on the show Jeff Tidball today. Now, you may not have heard of him, so we're going to let him introduce himself because if there's one thing Jeff does that I'd like to do, he wears a lot of hats in the industry. So, Jeff, well, first of all, welcome to the show, and could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I absolutely would. I kind of decided in 6th or 7th grade when I played D&D for the first time that was very nearly the greatest thing ever, and that I wanted to make games as a career. And so I just kind of started in on that in whatever seemed like the most obvious way at hand. So I did some design on spec in high school and college, and through the networks that I had made just of local gamers and game clubs and things here in the Twin Cities, managed to land kind of a part-time PR job at Atlas Games, helping them write press releases and promote games and stuff. What I really wanted to do was design, and got a chance to do that at Atlas because I just impressed them with my ability to follow through on promises. So I was the Ars Magica line developer for about 5 years and did a whole bunch of other RPG stuff as I moved around the country. I've worked on the Lord of the Rings RPG and the Dragon Age RPG and done some freelancing for D&D. And then when I worked at Fantasy Flight Games for a while, really got into more board and card design and more into the publishing and producing end of things there as well. So I collaborated with Eric Lang there on Chaos in the Old World. I was the producer on that project, and I designed the Horus Heresy edition that Fantasy Flight did there, and just got a chance to work on a lot of different projects like that, not as a primary designer, but as the kind of person who we came to call a producer, I guess, at FFG in those days, but who does creative adjacent or creative work, development work sometimes, but works with printers and tries to figure out how does the project come together apart from designing it. So did a bunch of that, and then have kind of come to also do a bunch of managerial and executive style work, I guess. These days, one of my biggest hats is the chief operating officer at Atlas Games. So in addition to working on titles that we release, I also manage the staff in the office and have planning and budgeting responsibilities and stuff like that. So anything that sort of touches a game I'm interested in, and at one point or another have probably worked on.
Now, you're certainly involved with Atlas. Is there any other parts of the industry that you're involved with?
Yeah, well, so since Last Origins, I'm an at-large director at Gamma. So sometimes I'm critical of things, and one of the things that you get if you're critical of Gamma is an invitation to kind of step up and and work on it. And so that's something that I decided would be worth trying to contribute to, because I definitely believe that the industry could be better in lots of different ways, and I think that one of the best ways that can be accomplished is by educating people or teaching them. One of the things that I've done on games is do workshops, and I taught a semester of a class at the Kansas City Art Institute on game design once when the original professor got sick for long term, and they had to find somebody who could teach that. So I really like teaching and educating and working with people to just kind of do whatever it is that they're doing better if it's something that I know about. So that's a key reason that I kind of wanted to get involved with Gamma. But past that, I do freelance for different companies and do consulting for some different publishers. My partner Will Heinmarch and I have a imprint called Game Playwright, where we publish nonfiction books about games and stories. because that's something. So the title that you may have most likely heard of there is called Hamlet's Hit Points. That is a book about kind of story analysis that is targeted towards role-playing games that Robin Laws wrote. We're just publishing the sequel to that. That's on pre-order right now. And then the next thing that we've got after that, which we're actually going to release at the Gamma Trade Show, is a book that Gary Ray wrote. He runs Black Diamond Games in Concord, California. So you may have read his Quest for Fun blog, but he has written a nonfiction book called Friendly Local Game Store about how to start a store.
Well, that's really interesting because I think of all the blogs from a game store, his is one of the most level-headed, informative I've ever read in my life.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And so when he popped up on my Facebook feed saying, I've been writing this blog, I'm thinking about writing a book. Do I know anybody who's got a connection to a publisher on that? I threw an elbow and leapt to the front of the line and I wanted to be involved in that because I think you're absolutely right.
Well, one of the things about starting a local game store these days is the industry is completely different than it was even 10 years ago, and it's consistently changing. And I guess, I see a lot of changes from outside, but you're seeing a lot of the changes from the inside too. So let me ask a couple questions in that regard. One of the hot topics of the day, and it gets hotter every year, and that's Kickstarter. How is Kickstarter affecting stores for good or bad?
So I think that the initial reaction from store owners to Kickstarter was very negative. I'm sure that you saw that as well. And I think that that's a perspective that many of the most enlightened retailers backed off from relatively quickly as it became clear that having people buy games on Kickstarter was not always bad for game stores, and in fact left them with new products that they could sell in stores that were great products and that they could have information about in advance, right? The retailer can look at the number of backers or the amount of money raised just as well as anybody else with a web browser can. And that's a great tool for a retailer to figure out what their customers might be interested in. Otherwise, for a non-Kickstarter game, a retailer is left looking at a paragraph of solicit text and a price point and maybe a cover image to make a decision about, or maybe a publisher's reputation or something like that. So a Kickstarter campaign can give a retailer a lot of information. I think now a lot of the frustration that arises from retailers is that since Kickstarter publishers are focused primarily on their Kickstarter backers, and since a lot of them don't have a lot of experience in what the distribution network looks like, they're just not very experienced at saying the kinds of operational things that a retailer wants to hear, like when will this ship to me, or what will my discount be, or will it be available in distribution, and from what distributors are you going to make available store promo kits, and all of those things are things that the distribution network is very accustomed to saying to retailers. They don't have to work very hard to get that information at all. But so a store that identifies a Kickstarter game that they would really like to carry sometimes has to do a lot of work figuring out how to carry it. You know what I mean?
Well, I do. And you mentioned the distribution network, but we're starting to see several Kickstarters and some fairly major ones skip the whole distribution process, skip everything else, and just sell direct. Do you feel like we're going to see more of that? Is that good or just different?
I think that is just different. I think that distribution absolutely brings advantages in that a retail store can order small numbers of a wide variety of products, and you have them all come in one box, which is a lot less operationally expensive. But if a publisher has a game that is so hot that a given retailer is going to be ordering case quantities of it, or quantities where the shipping makes sense, or if the publisher is willing to eat part of that shipping expense, if it makes sense to eliminate that distribution network, then I think that can be fine for everybody. I don't think I've worked with lots of very fine distribution partners and they absolutely fulfill a need for publishers and for retailers. But I don't think that distribution is ordained by God to be a thing that must be present in our world if it's not solving a problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder. I don't own a publishing company. If I did, or work with one, I don't know, how do I feel about doing Kickstarter? Because initially Kickstarter was something that, hey, you run it to, raise money to do something that wasn't possible otherwise. And regardless of what people say, it's not that anymore. It's just simply a pre-order system for many people, and many major publishers have gone over to Kickstarter, including many who said they never would. Why would a publisher not use Kickstarter? Because it seems like pretty good from their end. They get pre-orders, they get money ahead of time.
A reason that a publisher would not use Kickstarter is, I think that the main reason that they might not is because, well, I think there's two main reasons that they might not. One of them is that it takes a lot of time and attention to run a Kickstarter. So during the month or however long that your Kickstarter is running, you're spending a lot of time just doing customer service and answering questions and promoting that Kickstarter through whatever networks you've got. Maybe you're buying social media ads. Maybe you are talking to podcasts, or maybe you are you're trying to do outreach to bloggers. However it is that you're publicizing your Kickstarter, you're kind of on for 8 hours a day or more doing that. And if you've got a traditional publishing company, you've got lots of other work to do also. So one reason that I think a publisher might not choose to do Kickstarter is just because they're not staffed to do that work, that of which there's a lot of it. And I think another reason that a publisher might choose not to do Kickstarter is just because if they're an older publisher, which is to say that if they've been in business for a long time and they've already got a lot of contacts and a lot of business apparatus built up around their business connections to distributors and to retailers, it's a lot easier for them to just put it into those same channels, right? The skids are already greased, the road is already cleared, and they may not actually have a great deal of information about who their end customers are. If all of those customers are used to buying their products in a game store, it's the local game store owner who knows who the people are that play those games. The publisher may not have a direct relationship with them, for good or for ill, right? That's a situation where not having a direct relationship with your customer can really hurt you if you want to make a transition in that way.
Now, we just saw recently, I believe Toys R Us is closing a fifth of their stores, which is not a positive thing at all when we see, this happening in many retail stores around the country. There's definitely an online presence now, which everyone has to deal with. I mean, it's from the top big, Amazon to just, pretty much everything is available online. It's fast, it's convenient. How do local stores deal with that? Because, and again, this is just my perspective. I've seen a lot try to deal with that in a sense of guilt, like, well, you should support us because we exist. But what are other ways that they can and compete in this very tough industry, and what are reasons that we should help them do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been thinking a lot about, or reading a lot about that as we work on getting Gary's book sort of out and ready to go. I think that it's really important for a store owner to know the answer to that question, to know the answer to the question of why would anyone come into my store to buy this stuff as opposed to getting it from Amazon or wherever they want to buy it from online. And I guess let me talk about a recent experience that I had this week, not in a game store, but actually in a store that is next door to the local game store that I go to in what I assume is a relatively similar industry. There is a small chain of bike stores called Eric's Bike Shop. My kids took up skiing this year, and one of the bindings broke on my son's snowboard. Now, the Eric's Bike Shop is a relatively expensive place to buy ski and bike equipment compared to other options that you might have to buy that. But we had purchased some goggles for my son there because it was his birthday and we wanted to have those. And so an immediate point of sale for that was good. So that was one place where that bike shop was very good, is I wanted to have that thing now, and we wanted to go try them on and have a look at them and hold them and so on. But when this set of bindings broke, I was able to bring them in there to try to have them repaired. They have a repair shop in there. There was someone there who was able to have a look at them and see after 2 or 3 minutes of looking at it that a repair of that binding was not going to work because it was cracked. And so we needed to have new bindings put onto those. Now, since we're all in my family new to skiing, if I have to try to research snowboard bindings online, that's just going to be a disaster. I'm going to get ones that don't fit that thing or don't fit my son or don't fit his boots or any of that stuff. So I think it is possible that I spent more on bindings than I could conceivably have spent if I had, gone online and done research and tried to find a discounted place. But as it stands, they actually discovered that the original bindings that we picked out did not fit the actual board that we got. So they did some research on their own, found another one of their stores where they did have bindings that fit, shipped them over to the store where the snowboard was at. Those bindings turned out to be cheaper and they fit. And I just got a call right before we came on here that those are ready to go. So I felt like that whole experience as a customer, right? I don't have any professional involvement in skiing or snowboarding or biking or anything like that. But that whole experience as someone who is new to what could potentially be a very expensive hobby, I had a really good experience because they were knowledgeable about that stuff and were able to help me solve an actual problem that I had as a person who was new to it. And I think that a lot of that stuff is exactly what a knowledgeable and pleasant game store can do, especially for people who are just getting into games and who don't already know all of this stuff that the three of us know, right? The three of us could leap online and immediately identify a ton of games that we would like to buy and where we could buy them for the very highest discount if we were so inclined. But there are lots of people, and like now these days, there are tons and tons of people coming into the hobby for the first time who don't know very much about what kinds of games they would like or whether the models from this particular line will work with a miniatures game that they are encountering for the first time, or if card sleeve brand Y is going to fit on the cards that come out of board game brand X. So there's just a lot of stuff that I feel like a well-run and well-staffed local game store, places where they can add value. And I don't think that people need to feel guilty about not taking advantage of that if that's not something that they feel gives them value. But I think that value is there for people who appreciate it. And like you were saying, I think everybody can make different decisions about what is most important to them.
So if these stores want to stay competitive, then they have to put an emphasis on service and basically knowledge, is what you're saying?
I think that is a killer thing that they can do, is be very well informed and be very personal and be very inviting and be very genuine about sharing that enthusiasm and that knowledge. I think that that's the one thing that a store can do. And in fact, I think maybe that is kind of the bar for entry. That's the lowest common denominator value. I think that there are other things that stores can do as well. I think that stores can host events, and I think that they can be uniquely good at hosting events. Now, I don't know that there is. Well, yeah. So I think that hosting events is another thing that stores can do very well.
Now, we've seen that the Gamma trade show is coming up in just a bit of a month away from this show being posted. And there's a good number of retail stores who come to that each year. But this year, the percentage of increase of stores coming is more than it's ever been, ever. It's a huge number coming. From my watching the different, folks who talk online and such, I'm seeing that everyone posted that they had an incredibly good 2017. That seems kind of at odds then with the fact that all these other stores in the country, and I've talked to people who work at Toys R Us, and they're just discouraged by the online advances against them. What is causing this great growth in the game store industry?
I'll tell you what I think it is, and I do not have any evidence for this, so this should be taken as kind of an educated guess of a at least modestly informed insider or enthusiastic student, I guess, of the whole thing. I have the sense that hobby gaming, tabletop hobby gaming, is growing very, very quickly in terms of the number of people who might not even consider themselves gamers now, honestly, but in the number of people who would be willing to play and would be excited to play what we would consider a tabletop hobby game. The number of people who would play a Catan or would play a Ticket to Ride or a King of Tokyo, or even if you push the envelope on what a hobby game is out to things like a Cards Against Humanity. But people getting involved in D&D who have never played role-playing games before. I think that that shows like Will Wheaton's tabletop show really, really broadened the audience for this kind of pastime. I actually think, like we were talking about Kickstarter before, I think Kickstarter is something that has really broadened the audience for who is interested in playing these games. I've got a friend who's a doctor who is not a gamer whatsoever, but got turned on to some Kickstarter games, watched some videos about them, and now buys a ton of that stuff and plays it with his son. He built himself a game table with the neoprene top on it. The thing is gorgeous. He built me a dice roller out of wood. And so this is someone who in prior generations we never ever would have had in gaming. But because there's great games available and because they are being promoted in social media and in shows like Tabletop and like yours and like Man vs. Meeple and all of these other outlets, there's lots of ways where people can find out about them and play them. And so I think that the growth in stores, a lot of it is because there's just a ton of people who think it's awesome.
So amongst all of these value-added elements that we're talking about in a friendly local game store that draw in new audience members, people who are not necessarily diehard gamers that are just dipping their toe in this pond, what do you think is the most important aspect of these extra services that get people to spend money in the store versus going to Amazon or another online outlet? Is it just simply knowledgeable staff? Is it events? Is it gaming space? Is it cleanliness? What is it that draws the newbies in more than, say, the stereotypical clubhouse store?
Yeah, right on. I think that it is just having a nice experience in a store. So anything that points towards a nice experience in a store would help attract and retain a customer like that. So I think that it is being greeted and spoken to by someone who works in the store, who is not awkward and who is able to carry on a conversation. I think that it is absolutely having a clean store, and that it's having a store that is well organized and well lit and that doesn't have dust on the stuff. And I know lots of stores like that I go to locally here in Minneapolis and St. Paul. One of them has been open, more than half of my life. I went in there for the first time when I was in 7th grade, and it's been a kind of a mainstay around here for a really long time. But I think anything, it's almost anything that would make you feel happy to visit a party or a friend's house would make you feel happy to visit a store. If the people there were kind to you, if they listened when you talked, if they said something relevant to you, if they helped you solve a problem that you had, I guess spoken that way, it seems almost stupid and banal, but I really think that that's a lot of it.
Well, that definitely works for me. I definitely, when I go to a store and walk in and you can tell the ones who care about you and the ones who do not. Or at least they pretend to care about me, which still makes me feel good.
Yeah, it's very hard to fake being genuine. I think that a store clerk who is faking an interest in their customers is not going to make it for obvious reasons. Much like you would not go back to a party where if someone throws a Christmas party every year, and if one Christmas they ignored you or talked down to you or insulted your shoes or just were not interested, they obviously didn't pay attention when you talked to them, you would not go back to that party next year. And that's fine. You shouldn't.
Well, let me ask you this. I think there's I hesitate to call it a problem because it seems like a good thing, but the industry, the number of games that's being published every year has gone up at pretty much an exponential rate. Kickstarter certainly contributes to this, but just the fact that the ease of being able to print a game in general has lowered. So there's so many games coming out on the market, and you work in publishing, so how do you make your game stand out, or especially to the local game store who has to sit here now and curate between not just a few dozen picks, but hundreds of picks a month?
Yeah, that's super rough. So I am of two minds about that. And so on one hand, as a person who loves games, and I really am a person who just loves games, I've devoted my life to games. As a person who loves games, having more games is great. If there are more games, there are, just by law of averages, going to be more good games and more great games. And there are going to be more games that are tailored to exactly what I want to play. So, like, back in the day, I was the hugest Car Wars fan imaginable. And so because there's this gigantic deluge of games, Osprey has just released a miniatures game that's kind of a successor to Car Wars. And I don't know if we weren't producing so many games that a game like that with a relatively niche market ever gets released. So I think that that's good for people who love games. Another reason that that's good for me personally, I guess, is that I like to educate and talk and help people who would like to become game publishers. So one of the projects that I worked on last year was something called the White Box. This was a game playwright project. It's a game workshop in a box. It's a game design workshop, essentially. So it's a box that comes with a whole bunch of cubes and meeples and tokens and stuff like that are all generic, intended for you to design your own game. And then it also comes with a 25-essay book that talks about how you would do these things. So how do you play test? How do you blind test? What information has to go on the outside of your box? Where can you find a printer? How should you operate a Kickstarter? All of these things. And so the fact that many more people are interested in publishing games, I guess it's to a certain extent good for me personally, because I'm interested in talking to people who are interested in publishing games. Now, it is very challenging to be a publisher, obviously, in a field that is more crowded. But I think that as the market grows, there's room for many of them. And I also think that there is room for games to be published at different levels of ambition. So think of novels. There are a lot of novels, obviously, right? I don't know how many novels exist. There's got to be millions of novels, you would think, right?
Seems like it. Eric reads all of them.
That's good. How do you find time to podcast?
No, he reads them out loud. That's his job.
Oh, I see. That's awesome. We made an audiobook out of the White Box essays, and that was a fascinating process of learning how to do that. Anyway, so there's the fact, I guess I don't see people bemoaning the idea that there is essentially an infinite supply of novels. And people who would like to be authors can sort of engage that industry of novel publishing on all kinds of different levels. So you can try to become a best-selling author if you want to invest a lot of time in that. And probably you don't succeed, but you can try to address it that way. Or you can try to become a genre author and work in a genre that you particularly love. Or there are lots of people who get to a certain point in their careers and they decide they're bored with that and they would just like to sit in the evenings and attempt to write a novel. And if 7 of their family members buy it at the end of the day, but they found that to be a valuable process, I think that that's great. So anywhere in between those extremes, I think is a legit way to embrace the idea of creating games. I think that it's valuable and fun to create a game, even if you only ever play it with the people who are in your gaming group. And so to that extent, I don't worry a lot about the fact that there's a lot of them.
I get that from that perspective. I'm just thinking from the retailer, how do they know which ones to carry? You can't carry all the games.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. I think that as we were saying before, Kickstarter signals them in a lot of cases which kinds of games are very attractive to people. I think that their own sales metrics, if they are doing a good job of looking into their POS systems for what has performed historically, that gives them information about what to continue to carry. I think that a lot of stores make decisions like that based on their historical experience with particular publishers. So if a publisher does something like offer price protection through some kind of a map policy, it's easy to see why a store owner would want to carry those games instead of a game that doesn't have a publisher who goes to that kind of a strategy. But it's tough. It's hard for me to say, honestly, how I would sit down and go about winnowing all that stuff up. I have enough problem looking in my closet and trying to figure out what to play. I'm sure you have that problem as well.
Well, it's just not possible to play everything. There's so much out there, which I think is a good thing. But I'm just curious if this will cause companies to go out of business as we move in the next couple of years. If we're going to see some shifts in the industry, can the industry support this many games? I don't know. I don't make any, judgment on that. I don't know. I wonder. That's all.
I think that we could maybe look at the health of the television production business as kind of an analogous business. It's a creative business, right? It's a business that is growing hugely, and the quality leaps in television are similar to the quality leaps that we've seen in board games. I think it's a golden age of especially the 1 hour drama, going back to kind of the first crop of the current wave of great shows like The Sopranos or shows like The West Wing, but like down to the stuff that is Netflix original programming these days. Shows like The Crown are amazing, but there are also niche shows that are for a smaller audience that are still getting distribution. So those shows are all being made by someone, right? Somebody's making a living. The screenwriters are Writers Guild card-carrying members. The people who work on all of those shows, all of the executives who greenlight them. So do those production companies sometimes go out of business if their shows don't make it? Yeah, sure. I imagine that's the case. But I don't have the sense that the TV business as a whole is in bad shape. And I guess in the same way, I think that even if there is upheaval in the game business and individual publishers are hurt, either because they don't adapt fast enough or because the distribution apparatus changes around, or just because they're unlucky, right? There's nothing that says you can't go out of business even though you made all the right decisions. And I think that's regrettable, but I don't know that that's caused by the deluge of releases.
So following this analogy, if say friendly local game stores are the broadcast and cable channels, if there's a point that those fill up, you're saying that games can be produced through other distribution, and we may see more games that are only available on Kickstarter or only available directly from publishers, and that is a growth area even if the friendly local game stores are overwhelmed and full of a particular style of distribution.
Yeah, I think so. And the nice thing about, I guess, the game store's adaptability is it's not like they can't carry I mean, they can carry any object that comes in a box, essentially, if they can make some kind of a deal with the people who are publishing it. I can't watch The Crown off of Netflix no matter what, because they control that thing all the way from their servers to my screen. But I think that any game could wind up being distributed in a store if the store recognizes that need among their local customers, or just if the owner thinks that it's awesome and wants to evangelize for it. I guess I don't know why a publisher would want to prevent an excited store from carrying a thing, although we have seen that in the past, so what do I know?
Well, either way, I mean, this is really good, and I think we could have talked for a couple more hours, and maybe we'll have you come back on sometime and talk some more. But before we end this, Jeff, is there anything you wanted to say to listeners, anything you want to promote or talk about?
No, I would just like to promote the idea that games are awesome, and that a lot of the stuff that seems, I don't know, I guess a lot of people take positions on whether distributors are good or bad, or Kickstarter is good or bad, or somebody is good or bad, a designer or whatever, that are based on just not thinking about it very hard. And I would just encourage everyone to not sign on to any bandwagons and to kind of think critically about their opinions as critically as they would think about whether a game is good or bad.
All right. Well, Jeff, we really appreciate you coming on. We wish you great success in the future. I look forward to I'm really interested in seeing this book come out soon. So we'll keep the audience updated when that does come out, so you can read more or hear more about that. Thanks again for coming on the show.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for having me on, Tom and Eric. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Oh, hey, future Eric here again. So I was getting ready to move on to the top 10 list in editing the show, and I noticed we've got a voicemail, which I didn't realize we had the capability to have, but let me just hit the button real quick.
Hi, Eric. Hi, Tom. I heard that you were talking about monster games this episode, and it got me to thinking about how few monster games I actually own, and then I started to wonder why that was. And I realized that I'm primarily a Euro-style gamer, and monster games trend toward the more, thematic side of gaming. So while I have tons of games with austere-looking people from the Renaissance and a plethora of those little wooden cubes, I don't have a ton of games with cool minis and colorful monster art. And that made me kind of sad. And since Euros are often thematically thin, I mean, let's face it, I wanted to know if you had any thoughts on why there aren't more monster-themed Euro-style games. And if you could retheme a classic Euro with monsters, which one would it be? Because I think I want to start a petition.
Oh, yeah. Well, Tom's not here to answer this question, but I don't know. I mean, there are some Euro games that have a monster theme. A few that are actually coming up on my top 10 list, I think that would apply. Let's see. If I had to retheme a classic Euro game, I'm trying to think of my top games. Well, you could take Pandemic and make the diseases like monster outbreak. You could even make it a Cthulhu. Oh wait, yeah, that's been done. Well, okay. How about Power Grid, where you're powering your power. You're trying to take over villages. Okay, and your power plants are different monsters, and you have to feed them by giving them different rocks to eat or energy, to charge them up, or lava or something, and that's what powers your monsters to what are you actually producing in that game? I don't know. I'm still working on this. Why don't we give this to the forums? Why not? What Euro game would work well with a monster retheme? Anyway, thanks, Suze. Good to hear from you, and let's move on to the top 10 list.
It's a Dice Tower Top 10!
The Dice Tower's Top 10 list is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.
Our monsters
Roar.
Can be anything from, Frankenstein in your closet to gigantic Godzilla, kaiju-type creatures to that guy who won't let you go through the checkout lane because you have 11 items instead of the 10 that it says on the sign.
You monster.
However, that guy we're not talking about.
No.
This is actually a really wide range here, right? At first, I was like, I wonder how many games I could find with monsters. And then I was like, oh, a lot. There's a lot. So I kind of picked games that have kind of an emphasis on monsters to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Somebody on the thread at Board Game Geek was like, what what do you focus on? Because there's all sorts of different monsters. I tried to focus on the mayhem aspect of monsters. A monster that's either hunting people or is destroying things. More so than like a dungeon crawl game where you're going to run into monsters, and those are monsters in the dungeon, but you knew they were there. That's kind of their house. So more of the classic movie monsters.
I think one of your games might not go with what you just said, but
we'll see.
Yeah, I get that. I just picked games. I tried to do a little bit of a wide range too.
Okay.
I could have picked all dungeon crawls maybe, but I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, with that being said, let's get to number 10.
Let's do it.
Number 10.
Number 10 is a kid's game. It's Monster Chase. This is currently published by Yellow Games, and it's a cooperative game where monsters are sort of surrounding a bed that represents the players, and you are trying to find objects to pacify these monsters. These aren't terribly scary monsters, but they'll be distracted by like a teddy bear or a baseball or something like that. And it's a memory game. You're trying to find the objects that will pacify these monsters. But if you make too many mistakes, the monsters will eventually surround the bed, and the players will lose. It's simple. It's a memory game for kids. You can add some extra tiles to make it a little more difficult for older players, but it's a well-produced, cute, cooperative game starring some cute monsters. Monster Chase, number 10.
I agree. That's a good one. My number 10 is one of only 2 crossovers that we have, and I will lead Eric to talk about that later, or lead the game to Eric. Maybe.
Number 9.
My number 9 is Monster Apocalypse, a game with miniatures where you can throw.
Now you've got to admit that this is a better game in theory than it is.
It is. I mean, but when you're talking about a monster game that emphasizes the mayhem and destruction that can come from classic giant monsters, this is definitely. There. Although I appreciate the Voltron version of this more than the kaiju version.
Yeah, but Voltron fights monsters. So
it does.
Legitimate.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I'm gonna say it's the Voltron Monster Apocalypse. But you can you can throw them around and crash them into things and cause damage to small things with big things. And I like the system of dice movement and stuff that makes this whole thing run. It's a little tricky to understand, but if you're looking for monster mayhem, Monster Apocalypse is not a bad place to look. It's my number 9.
All right, that's a good choice. I feel like it's just that it's. I want to see a better version of this. Someone out there make a better version of this, and then send me all the stuff for it because the components were amazing. My number 9 is Kemet or Cyclades, either one. I put them together because they both have that same feel where one's ancient Greece, the other is ancient Egypt, and you're doing all this stuff, but it's centered around these giant Greek mythological monsters or ancient Egyptian monsters, from giant scorpions and giant snakes to giant, titans and cyclops and the Kraken. And they're not that huge, I guess, but they're bigger than your normal pieces in this game. And these monsters actually mean something and change the way, and they are your monsters to control, which is something I like a lot. So my number 9, a tie between Kemet and Cyclades.
Number 8.
Number 8 is Pyramid, the Ravensburger kids game about a mummy that is hunting the players while they search for treasure. Now, this is maybe more of a dungeon crawl than I originally said was going to go on this list. But the hunting aspect of this is what I was really being drawn to, where one player is moving this magnetic mummy around trying to find the treasure hunter players. And that tension of being on the treasure hunter side and watching this mummy piece move around and hoping he doesn't come down your hallway because he's 2 steps away from you, and if he comes this way, he's going to get you. Oh, good, he went the other way. That's the aspect that I really like about Pyramid. In German, it's Fluch der Mumie. It's my number 8.
My number 8 is Smash Up because the whole game is just monsters, really. I guess not all monsters. You could be like heroic ninjas and things like that. But there is a lot of monster factions in Smash Up. From the giant dinosaurs to, the vampires to the ghosts. There's just monsters all over the place. And if you want to play a monster mash, if you have several of the expansions for Smash Up, you can play all monsters, right? You could do like a Halloween-themed Smash Up game. I shall think about that. But anyway, Smash Up, monster, cool.
Absolutely. I did consider this. I think I maybe just don't have enough monster factions for my set. So I felt there were enough non-monster factions that it didn't quite fit. But I like the choice.
I'm going to go through and count now. I wonder how many monster factions there are. I think there's at least 8, though, that you could play. I mean, again, I have like all 45 factions or whatever.
Number 7.
Number 7 for me is Monsters Menace America. This was produced by Avalon Hill.
This is the nicer sounding version of the game. It was originally called Monsters Ravage America.
There you go. So in this game, you are you're one of the giant kaiju monsters, and you're destroying all sorts of stuff, basically gaining power for an ultimate battle royale at the end. But again, if you're looking for that monster mayhem and smashing things, classic monster combat, this is a good one. Hard to find now. This I think came out at least a decade ago. But Monsters Menace America, number 7.
The problem with this game is it's just not that great of a game. It's okay. It kind of, like 90% of the game does not matter. It comes down to just a big dice chucking final contest between monsters.
Okay, but if you're looking for that.
But you could just play a couple other games on our list.
Okay.
Number 7 for me is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. And this is the one of only 2 Cthulhu games on my list. I think there's no denying that Cthulhu is a monster. I didn't want to flood this with Cthulhu beings, but Mansions of Madness, you run into the monsters, and you're not like hacking and slacking in Mansions of Madness. You're like detectives in a mansion, and then a monster comes in, and you fight them because you have to, but you're not sitting there like, pull out your sword. You're like, and doing your best against the monsters. And I like that a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. Mansions of Madness.
Of all of the games on your list that I have not yet played, I think this is the one that most interests me. I need to find a way at a convention or something to play this game.
Yeah, I'm not going to even promise anymore because we've done too many times where I'll be like, oh, well, next time. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Exactly.
Number 6.
Number 6 is another one of the hunting games. That's Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space, where one set of players are humans, the other set of players are aliens, but pretending to be humans and hunting the players and trying to eat them before they can escape into the escape pods. It's a game of hide and seek and a lot of tension and bluffing and tracking of movement. The current Osprey version is very, very cool. Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space, number 6.
That is a really good choice, Eric.
Yeah.
My number 6 is Eldritch Horror. This is the other Cthulhu-themed one. And I picked this one because in Eldritch Horror, you are running through over the world and fighting small monsters, but every once in a while, you fight these mega monsters, like a humongous giant spider. Or Cthulhu, which is the daughter of Cthulhu, and I didn't know existed until I played Eldritch Horror. And if you're like me, you hunt down the Fantasy Flight has made miniatures of a lot of these things, and I play with those instead of the tiles that come with the game. And then you feel like these are gigantic monsters. Eldritch Horror, my number 6.
Number 5.
Number 5 I just talked about 2 weeks ago. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the more recent Jasco edition. What really works for me as a monster game is the fact that the vamps, the demons and the vampires are overtaking the city and trapping townies. And it's a real problem that you need to come in as the Scooby Gang and clean up and save everybody from this monster menace that's just taking over everything, as well as whatever happens to be the monster of the week or the big bad that you have to take down. I feel like it really captures that chaos and having to save the world. Number 5, Buffy the Vampire Slayer from Jasco.
But doesn't this one break your mold about being like a dungeon crawl type thing?
I don't think this fits dungeon crawl.
Am I thinking of the other Buffy the Vampire Slayer game, aren't I?
I don't really see a dungeon crawl there either.
Okay.
It's You've got the map of the town, and you're trying to protect. It's almost closer to a zombie game than a dungeon crawl. Save the people and find out what's going on.
I'll never know. Number 5 is Ultimate Warriors with a Z at the end. In this game, you got some monsters, and they're all fighting in an arena. I guess they're not all monsters. Well, is a goblin a monster? I don't know. They all seem like monsters to me. From a dragon to a troll to a goblin. I almost put in Colossal Arena, too, because in that one, you're betting on the monsters to see who's going to win. But this one is like a smash-up style, fight them all around in the game. Ultimate Warriors, my number 5.
Yeah, this is a good one. I'm not sure why this one didn't end up on my radar.
Because it's hard to... This game, really flew under the radar. It came out, we talked about it, and I don't see anyone ever playing it or anything.
Yeah. No, what I liked about Ultimate Warriors is that the characters all have different sizes, and so you can pick the big old dragon, but it's not as maneuverable as some of the smaller ones. There's that size aspect was kind of cool. Anyway.
Number 4.
Number 4, Tom mentioned as his number 10. That's Fearsome Floors, the game that you're trying to escape from a catacomb with your characters, but they're two-sided discs. So you may move 5 spaces one turn, but only 2 spaces in the next turn. And based on what the monster sees, he's going to move toward what he sees, the closest guys. And based on how you position your guys, you can draw that monster into interesting places and try and eat your friends. Anyway, it's a blast. Fearsome Floors, number 4.
This was actually the first game I thought of when making this list, because it's just a game where there is a monster chasing you all.
Yeah,
and I love the fact that Fearsome Floors allows you to build your monster.
Yes.
So you can make Frankenstein. That's the one on the box. But you can also make Blobular Head Crazy Creature from the Lagoon. And yeah, it's you got to play this with the right group, where people don't want to take too long to take their turn. But if you do that, it's a lot of fun. I also like the 3 investigators shout out in the game, which is a very rare thing.
There's a lot of references in there too.
Yeah, there is. My number 4 is Ghost Stories. Now, this game it's a cooperative game. You're fighting against ghosts. Ghosts are monsters, especially the ghosts in this one. In fact, once you start playing, I don't think you think much about the fact that these are ghosts. You're just like, who are these evil creatures that are just I hate them all. There's one that their eyeballs have teeth. Ah! That is a monster. So Ghost Story is my number 4.
You're absolutely right. I think I view this a little more mechanically and don't get the monster mayhem or hunting aspect. It's just things are coming toward you.
No, man, they scare me. They're not things. They're people. Shame on you.
Oh,
well, they used to be people.
Yes.
Number 3.
Number 3 is the Legendary Encounters Alien system. I love the way threats work their way toward you in this game. The bad cards start out in sort of this corridor, and you can spend attack power to flip them over to see what they are. But if you don't know what's there. You have no idea. And they may be a cat. They might be a xenomorph that's going to eat your face. I like it. Legendary Encounters, specifically Alien, my number 3.
For sure. The aliens are monsters. My number 3 is Blood Rage, because in Blood Rage you have these Vikings, and then you are hiring or producing. I don't know where these monsters come from, but you have these monsters. And they definitely affect the game tremendously. When you have the giant sea monster or the humongous troll or whatever, they're just big monsters, and they're yours, and you get to do cool things. Shades of of Kemet. This is something, if you want me to like your game, let me play a little army that has a chance to hire a giant monster, and I'm happy. Blood Rage lets me do that.
I mean, Blood Rage is an awesome game. I love it. But this felt to me more like a game with monsters as opposed to a monster game, if that makes sense.
I will allow that, but I would not. My liking of Blood Rage would be like at 50% without those monsters. In fact, you can play the game without ever hiring a monster. I have never done so.
Yeah, I don't think it would work out all that well. But
no, you could. You could do like certain strategies and not hire the monsters.
That's true.
You could do there's a lot of things, but no, I want the monsters.
Okay.
Number 2.
Number 2 definitely has monsters. That's Rampage or Terror in Meeple City.
That's a terrible name.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know. That I could argue about how silly it was for them to call the game Rampage without having the Rampage license. Anyway, it's a dexterity game with buildings made out of meeples and cardboard, and you're moving your wooden monsters around and flicking discs and blowing on things and dropping buses, and ultimately, it's a little flawed as a game, but it's so much fun to destroy things and to knock over these buildings. And if you want to feel like a monster rampaging a town, this is a great way to do it. Terror in Meeple City, or my preferred Rampage, number 2.
My number 2 is Rising Sun. I think I've already talked about this episode.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. Yeah.
Oh, man, I'm going to talk about this game a lot. This game is just so much fun. Same thing as Blood Rage. I get to play a samurai army or whatever, and I get to get monsters. And what I really like is one of the expansions that came out, and this is not a Kickstarter exclusive, you'll be able to get this with the later on, is more monsters. And you can just throw these in. So there's even more monsters than when you originally did it. I guess they're not called monsters in this game. They're demons or onis or whatever. They're monsters. They're monsters. And I love it. They're huge, they're great, they're fun. Rising Sun, my number 2.
And finally, number 1.
So, number 1, Tom mentioned earlier that when he first thought of this list, he thought of Fearsome Floors. I thought, and I think Tom, close behind, thought
it was like
King
a tie.
of Tokyo. Yeah. And that is both of our number 1s, King of Tokyo, the die-rolling monster combat game. Also, I'd throw King of New York in there. It's basically the same system, sort of more advanced. I think Tom would agree. It's what does that for me in this game is the upgrading of your monster. You collect energy tokens, cubes, and you can spend these to give your monster an extra head, to give it an energy beam, flame breath, have a sun, just whatever crazy cards you can purchase and add to your monster, giving them special abilities. And that's where this game really shines, as these monsters sort of diverge and become unique beings as they battle over Tokyo. King of Tokyo, my number 1.
Yeah, I agree. They keep trying to make games that compete with this. Ultimate Warriors, Simon made a robot one, and these are all good games. I actually like the different games, but it's just hard to beat King of Tokyo or King of New York. I like them both. They're essentially the same. And you know how popular this game is when they keep releasing new monsters for this game for various reasons and sell them, and people pay like $20 for one monster. It's just people will go out of their way to find more monsters for this game. They don't change the game at all. It's just that you want to pretend to be a giant penguin or a giant My Little Pony or whatever. And it just, the card artwork, everything about King of Tokyo, this is just a great, great game. Let's now take a look at the People's Choice. Number 10, Rampage, Terror Meeple City, just like Eric.
There we go.
Number 9, Dead of Winter. I guess zombies are monsters.
They are absolutely monsters, yes.
Number 8, Ghost Stories. Number 7, Kemet. Number 6, Rising Sun. Number 5, Gloomhaven, because Gloomhaven's in everything. Now, I didn't pick Gloomhaven because I love Gloomhaven. It's an amazing game. The monsters are kind of obstacles to beat for me in this game.
Right.
I'm just working at leveling my guy up, and I don't think about the monsters as much as I think about the heroes. I don't know how else to explain it.
Okay.
Number 4, Betrayal at House on a Hill. That definitely has monsters in it.
Yes, but not every time, which is why I kept it off. Like, you can have, a particular scenario might be monster-based, but then another one might be, this guy just went crazy. So, yeah.
Number 3, Mansions of Madness. Number 2, Blood Rage. And number 1, just like us, King of Tokyo. And that may be the first time I remember where we and People's Choice all picked the same number 1.
Yes. It's like this list was made for that one.
It was. I know it. What's next week? Is it animals, I think?
Is it?
It might be. Well, no, look, I like doing, I know some people are like, what are you doing these topical lists for? Because I think topic's important. When someone comes up to me and they're like, oh, what's a good board game I would like? I almost always start off by saying, what do you like?
Yeah.
Because if I can find a good game for that person with that theme, they're going to enjoy that a lot more.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really get why someone wants to sit in a boat for 10 hours and wait for a fish to bite the hook. I don't really enjoy that much, but someone who does, if I can think of a good fishing game, I can use that to get them to play a board game.
What is a good fishing game?
I knew you were going to ask that. As soon as I started this, I was like, oh, no. Well, there was that one. I haven't played it, but Z didn't like it, that deep water thing, but I heard from other people that it's good.
I had the one where you could catch not a fish.
Oh, wait. What about the one with Happy Salmon? How about that? That's not...
Happy Salmon. No, that's it. But that's not about fishing. It's just Happy Salmon.
Oh, you should take Happy Salmon to the thing, Eric.
I don't have Happy Salmon, but that would be a good one. Yeah, I don't have one.
I have two that are different colors so that I can play Happy Salmon with 12 people.
Yes.
That's foolishness, but I'm going to do it.
It is foolish.
Well, folks, that's it for another episode. We will see you guys next time. We certainly appreciate everyone coming by. We want to say thank you again to all those of you who supported us in a Kickstarter. That was really cool of you. I want to say thanks to Jeff Tidball for coming on and talking in this episode. And we'll try to get more folks. If you're listening to this, you're like, I'm in the game industry, and these guys never invited me to be on this show. Let us know. Maybe we will. But anyway, until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode number 542 was recorded on February 8th, 2018. Mandy and Suzanne join you next week, and in 2 weeks, Tom and I look at our top 10 food games. Support for this podcast comes from listeners like you. Thank you. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. Find out more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Mandy, Suzanne, and Eric, with production assistance from Itai Perez, Derek Porter, and Rob Siri. Our theme was composed by Timothy Pinkham. Gifts for Fishermen provided by Raptor. And hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games at great prices at coolstuffinc.com. We love feedback. Visit the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, email us at dicetower@gmail.com, or visit our new Facebook page. And of course, you can find more from the Dice Tower Network, including the Out of Game podcast, Board Game Design Lab, the D6 Generation, the Family Gamers, Blue Peg, Pink Peg, the Portal Gaming podcast, Every Night is Game Night, and Board Game Breakfast at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. Did you hear Mandy's monster impression last week?
No.
Rawr. It was great.
That's it? Rawr?
Well, yeah.
Well, what's yours? What's yours?
Made me feel...
Here's mine. Let's play Monopoly.
No!